So, welcome to another episode of Bound by Divine Word podcast. We have another special guest with us today who is a 7-time published author and has just published her latest book that speaks to her personal testimony called The Power of Reconciliation. Please help me welcome Leah Forney. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. When you initially reached out, and made contact with me, and I just read a little bit of your bio, but that book just did something to my spirit. The Power of Reconciliation. That is powerful. That title is so powerful. Yes. So you are a 7-time published author.
Yes, ma'am.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And they're all faith-based books. So I always have to ask, what's your story that led you to use your ministry to author books?
Oh, yeah. So, my backstory is I am a native of Queens, New York. I am actually the daughter of two addicts. So, my mother has been a drug addict since I was 2 years old. My father was an alcoholic and in and out of prison since I was 9. So, growing up, of course, I felt different. Right. I'm like, I wasn't raised with my parents. I lived with my maternal grandmother and my aunt and my grandfather. And so, growing up in the suburban area of Queens, New York, all my friends had family households, two parent households, except me. So, I always felt like the odd one out. It was always this feeling of like, why did I have to be different? Right. And so, writing was my way of escape.
Mm-hmm.
Writing was the thing that I used to like create a fantasy world about who my parents were. So, when people would ask me about my dad and ask me about my mom, I just had a different story for them. It
Wow.
was my way of not having to talk about my reality, which was I'm the daughter of two addicts and my
Mm.
parents couldn't raise me. So I used the pen to kind of process through my emotions and my feelings. And my grandmother, she used to always tell me as a kid how she always saw me in the corner with a notebook and a pen,
Wow.
always writing something. So
That's
writing was the catalyst to getting me through growing up feeling different, feeling abandoned, feeling rejected behind my own parents not being able to raise me. Fast forward though, never thought I would be an author until about 2016, 2017. And I remember just saying out loud to God, I said, I think I want to write a book. Don't ask me why I said
wow.
that. But I said it, and he nudged me to do it. And so 2017 I released my very first book, Unapologetically Me, which really is the journey of being a motherless daughter and the up and down tumultuous relationship I had with my mom while she was in addiction. And so that was the beginning of this journey that I've been on.
Wow. That's amazing because although you did go through that, your gift came from that. Your
Yeah.
purpose came from that. And that's just powerful in itself.
Yeah.
You know, usually people turn to other things, right?
Yeah.
You turn to writing. And look at you today. You are a 7-time published author.
Yes,
That
ma'am.
is amazing. You know, how did you, what led you down your road to faith? How did that come about? I mean, you came from a mom who was on drugs, your father, alcoholic. How did that come about?
Yeah, I gotta credit grandma. I have to credit grandma. My grandmother was big on raising us into the church. So it was me, my older brother, my sister, and literally Sunday, every Wednesday for Bible study, we were in church. And so she started building my faith in God from a very young age. Even though I didn't necessarily know who God was, I think for a very long time I was riding on grandma's coattail and her relationship with God. So I remember probably when I turned about 17 years old, I remember she sitting us down and literally saying, "Okay, I'm not going to force you to go to church no more because now he's got to be your God. You can't get, all these benefits because of who my relationship with him. Now you have to have a relationship." And so I did what typical teenagers would do when they get freedom, right? It was like,
Mm.
"What? I ain't going to church." So from probably like 17 to maybe 21, I was just in the world doing my own thing. Um, But what really was the catalyst, the change, and really had me realize that God never left me, I left him. I ended up in a domestic violence relationship from the age of 19 to 23. And the last time that man hit me, I remember barricading myself into our bedroom because we were living together at the time. And I just cried out. I said, God, I don't even know if you hear me, but I need you to get me out of this. And I promise you, if you get me out of this, I will serve you. And
Mm.
I didn't know how it was going to happen. I didn't even know if he heard me because we talking about 4 or 5 years of not going to church, not praying. I'm just doing me,
Right.
but I learned that scripture that is so true that when you train up a child in the way that they should go, that when they get old, they don't depart from that way. I knew to pray because I came from a praying grandmother. She still prays and covers me to this day. So I cried out. The very next morning, the guy that I was in the abusive relationship with, he literally says, "Get out." And I just happened to, like, deep down inside had this smile that I don't think he even realized it, because I it was that moment where I knew God heard me. So I
Mm.
grabbed my stuff, I got out, I moved back home, and it was from that moment that I was like, okay, let me see what this God is really about. So I started going to church. I started really like learning how to pray, because I think for a long time I thought prayer had to be these like big fancy words.
Mm.
And it wasn't until one of my dear mentors, and she's an elder to me, said to me, "No, he just wants you to talk to him like you would talk to anybody else. He just wants to hear your heart."
That's
And
right.
so it really was the beginning of me developing my faith in God, and seeing that, you know what, when you pray, he does answer, right?
That's right.
And that he does know how to get you out of some stuff that you put yourself in.
Ooh, yes. Yes. Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So that was the beginning of the faith walk for me. And literally at 23 years old made that declaration, and I never looked back.
Mm, mm, mm. Wow. Yes. Yes. But at least you did it at a young age. You
Yeah.
know, some it takes a long time, such as myself. It takes a much longer time. But one thing I learned in that dark hour, I heard something so powerful. That's when God reveals your identity,
Yes.
right? In that dark
Yes.
hours where He molds you. I understand that scripture so well now, just through my season of, darkness and what I went through. Weeping may endure for a night, but
Mhm.
joy comes in the morning. Once you
Yes.
surrender, yes, you have to go through that season, but now you're not doing it alone. Now you're making different choices. And when you said, Lord, I surrender, and you gave everything over to Him, that was
Yeah.
it,
That was
right?
it.
Your life changed after that. Your identity changed. And that's a powerful thing.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. So, talk to us about the power of reconciliation.
Yes, that's, honestly, I say all my books are my baby, but this probably is one of my favorites, and it's because, so as a nonfiction author, I tell people, because people always ask me how do I come up with titles and chapters and all that, and I pray about it. Every book that I've ever released, I pray about it, and that is because I am aware that God gave me the gift, and he can also take it away whenever he feels like it. So every time I feel nudged to write a book, I submit it to him, and I ask him, okay, God, what do your people need to hear? What do they need to read? And so Power of Reconciliation came at a time where a year ago this month, my mother had a massive stroke. I was awakened in my sleep at like 3 o'clock in the morning, where a drug dealer called my phone, holding my mother hostage, basically saying she owed all this money, and that if we didn't give up the money, they were going to harm her. And at first, I'll be honest with you, Tanya, I was like, oh, this is the devil. Like, I was mad, right? But God easily softened that anger and was like, no, like, trust me in this process. So then 2 days after that initial phone call, I get another phone call at 5 a.m. Only this time it's the hospital. And they're like, your mother has been severely beaten. She has a massive blood clot. She has had a stroke. She cannot communicate. We need you to make a decision on whether to do emergency surgery. So here I am, 5 o'clock in the morning, and literally my mother's life or death is hanging in my hands. And I was like, listen, y'all do whatever y'all need to do to save my mother. So I called my grandmother, I called my aunt, and I'll be honest, neither one of us thought she was going to make it because my mother had been on drugs since I was 2. She's still battling with it. So after the surgery, she makes it through. Now she's got to learn how to walk. Now she's got to learn how to talk. And in that time frame, God was using me to help heal that relationship with me and my mother.
Wow.
And I didn't know why, because I'm sitting here like, God, listen,
Yeah.
I told you that I don't really want to do this. Like like I'm fighting with him, and he's just like, are you going to trust me? Are you going to trust me? So I'm like, okay. So of course, I'm my mom's, power of attorney. So I'm talking to the doctors. I'm helping her get into rehab. I'm doing all of these things, and it was so weird for me this time around because I've done it before. This wasn't the first time I had to step up to the plate for my mom, but I think for me, I saw her differently, and I learned that as you heal, you see things differently, you do things differently, and you hear differently. So I stopped seeing my mom as the woman that was addicted to drugs and started seeing her as a woman that's struggling through this thing called life, and she don't know how to make it through. So during that time of having to help her learn how to walk and talk and communicate, I am one of 6 siblings. Most people didn't know that. My mom gave up 3 of her children at birth. So as I am helping my mother heal, God then turns around and I get a phone call from my grandmother, and she's like, guess what? And I'm like, what? And she's like, we found your other 3 siblings. And I'm like,
Wow.
what? Like, what are you talking about? You found? And she's like, their adopted mother reached out to us. Like, we want to connect you. So God showed me how, and I'll be honest, I have always prayed for my siblings, always wondered how they were doing. And God showed me in that 1 year his power of reconciliation,
Mm.
how he can literally help heal you from the inside out, how he can bring closure to places in your life that you
Wow.
never thought. I mean, it was always a dream. And now I got all of my siblings.
Yeah.
And now we have this great bond and we talk every day. That was once just a dream that I'm like, I don't even, and I actually stopped believing God in that area. Like, I don't know if you ever gonna make it happen.
Mm.
And then it took my mother having to have a massive stroke and us thinking that she's gonna die for him to bring it all the
Wow.
way back full circle. So that's how Power of Reconciliation got birthed.
Wow. Yeah, it seemed like your life is really the epitome of something greater. It
Yeah.
was always the epitome of something greater from the time you were a child, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was with your mother. It was always something leading to that. Look at God. Wow. Wow. What keeps you bound by divine word?
Mm. You know what? For me, it's knowing that everything that I go through in life is bigger than me.
Mm.
I have grown in the place of space where I no longer see myself as a victim, right? I
Yes.
see myself as somebody that's thriving and surviving. And I tell people what has helped me in that is changing my questioning, right? Because I feel like sometimes when we say to God, why me, right? It keeps us in a place of victimhood.
Yes, it
But
does.
when we begin to ask
That's
how does
right.
this keep happening? How do I keep ending up here? Now we shift from this place of victimhood to now I'm surviving and thriving and I'm doing introspective work.
Mm.
Because it was easy for me, it was easy to point the finger and say, oh, my parents didn't raise me and they weren't there and da 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 da. And so this is why I am the way that I am. Yeah, that's partially true, right? But a lot of who I am is also the sum total of the choices I've made as
That's
well
right.
that had nothing to do with my parents. And so what keeps me bound is constantly really working on me,
Mm.
constantly waking up every day um, to be intentional. I tell
Yes.
people I set a theme for every year, and 2021 was the year of intentionality for me. And I said to God, I said, listen, I don't want to do anything that's not with purpose and on purpose.
Mm.
Like, that's it. If it's not intentional, if it does not produce purpose, I don't want to do it. And so having that theme, constantly working on me, constantly focusing on being the best version of myself, right? I tell people, healing to me is the stepping stone to wholeness, because God promised you wholeness. He didn't promise you a healing, right?
Right. Right.
And so, but you got to go through it,
Yes.
and I tell people that healing is like open heart surgery with no anesthesia, right? You're
Ooh.
gonna feel it.
Oh yes.
But if you get on the other side of that thing, you'll find that's where you find destiny.
Yes, you
That's where
do.
you found purpose. That's when you
Yes.
really find who you are in God.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
when you find it. And so that's what keeps me bound by divine worth.
Wow. How awesome is that? How awesome is that? Yes, yes. And and I look at healing as, for me, an ongoing journey.
Yeah.
Because there's always an area that has not been dealt with in some way.
Oh
And it's
yeah.
always, for me, it's a reminder you're always going to need God. you
Yes.
know. So for me, it's always that opportunity for God to always put me back. Like you still need me, right?
Mhm.
You still need me no matter what. Yes, wow, wow, yes, that wholeness, yes. What would you say to someone that is going through what you've been through? What would
Mm.
you say to them? Excuse me. How would you encourage them today?
Yeah. I would say a few things. One, be honest. Be honest about the place and space in which you are in. I think we are accustomed to just wearing masks, and I was one of them. For a very long time, I was the person that would tell you I'm fine, but deep down inside, I'm
Mm,
I'm dying, right? Like this is what, because I was raised in a family where the women in my family, we just black women in general, we just keep going, we keep plugging
right.
at it. And so what I had to learn was I had to, one, be honest about my issues, because we have them, right? But then I also had to learn how to be vulnerable enough to say, one, when I need help, and two, when I'm not okay,
That's right.
right? Because again, we're accustomed to just, oh, I'm fine, but are you really? Are you
Mm,
really fine? So I had to learn to be honest about what it is that I was feeling, in order to be honest with God. Because here's the thing, we think that we can lie to God, and He knows
yeah,
the hurt, He knows the pain, He knows where you're struggling, He knows. He's just waiting on you to get honest about what it is that you're
exactly.
feeling.
That's right.
And so it starts with being honest and being vulnerable enough with yourself and your God about what it is that you're feeling. The next thing that I would sit here and say is, connect with a therapist. I am an advocate for therapists. I work in the mental health sector,
Yes.
so I am big on therapy. I went to therapy, started 3 years ago going to therapy because I lost my fiance. But in the course of going, because I was like, oh, I'm grieving, let me go to therapy, I started unpacking mommy issues and daddy issues and all these other
Wow.
issues that I was like, no, I mean, I handled that. And Jesus was like, no, you didn't. Like you just kind of
Hmm.
tucked it away. But therapy was the thing that really helped me to, one, deal with me and recognize my issues, but also help me to see my parents differently, because
Hmm.
I stopped seeing them for their issue,
Hmm.
and started seeing them as the individual, the same way God sees us,
That's
right? He doesn't
right.
see the issue, He sees who He created.
That's
And so
right.
it helped me to be like, oh, my mom is just another woman who happens to be broken and trying to figure this thing out. So I can see her as that today, but
Wow.
3 years ago I couldn't, because the inner child in me, who had been abandoned, who had been hurt, who had been rejected, just saw her as the drug addict that she was. And so going to therapy was the catalyst really for change. And then definitely be connecting with your spiritual side. We're spiritual beings. Like,
Yes.
pray,
Yes.
meditate. I tell people I start and end my day in prayer and
That's
meditation,
right.
because I want to hear what is it that God needs me to focus on? Where does God want me to go? But what I have learned in the course of my own healing, when you heal, you give those connected to you permission to do the same.
Yes.
I have had family members, I have had friends who have watched me go through my healing journey publicly and be transparent about it, say, it's because of you I decided to go to therapy. It's because of you I'm now dealing with my issues. So I tell people, like, transparency is everything. It's no sense in hiding it, because, one, you'll find your community when you're transparent, because
Hmm.
you'll find that it's not just you, right?
Exactly.
So every time I have written and released a book, I found out it wasn't just me who had mommy issues. It wasn't me who also had a mother who was a drug addict that you had love hate relationship with. Like it wasn't just me,
Right.
because the trick of the devil is to make you feel like it's just you.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're open about it and you're honest about it and you're vulnerable enough to share and courageous enough to share, you will then find God will place you in the community of people who now get it. And so you don't have to go through it alone.
Wow. Yes, that's very good advice. Yes, very, very good advice. If someone wanted to reach out to you, make some contact, how would they go about that?
Yeah, so I'm on all social media platforms as Leah M. Forney, or you can connect with me through my website, which is just www.leahmforney.com.
All right. All right, Leah, thank you so much for
Thank you.
stopping by and sharing that powerful story. And just to see you today, I just see so much more happening,
Thank
in your
you.
life. Definitely. And thank you again for stopping by because I know you bless the audience too. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yes. Take care.